Does any of this sound familiar? That's my question today. I believe that the greatest single failure, and it is a massive failure, of the American education system in this country is a failure to answer one question. One question. If they had answered this one question effectively, we would not be where we're at today. What's that question? How did Hitler manage to get enough power to convince an entire country to do what they did? That's the question. Now, if you're a Trump supporter and you made it this far, you're not going to like the rest of this. If you're pissed off, I don't care. If you stick around, I don't care. I don't expect you to be intellectually honest about any of this, regardless to what you think or feel. It doesn't change the facts. These are the facts. Feel free to look them up. Google is free. I wish you guys would have used it a couple of months ago. But these are the facts. Now, you can't explain how Hitler did what he did in 30 seconds, which is why we got the lesson of Hitler bad, killing Jews bad. That was easy. That's an easy one. How do you get somebody to be able to manipulate an entire country into doing that stuff? That's not as easy, and it takes a minute. I have to explain. So if you're not up for it, feel free to scroll right now. But this is going to take a minute. I'm not going to try and coalesce 20-something years worth of German history into 30 seconds. But it is important because if you understand how Hitler was able to do that, you understand how we got to where we are today. And you also understand that there's only a few avenues for us to be able to get out of it. Here we go. After World War I, when Germany lost the war, because, yeah, it was Germany on that one too. After Germany lost the war, the European nations, the people of the European nations, were so mad at Germany for everything that they had been put through by Germany's aggression that they decided that they were going to punish Germany hard. And they did. They decimated Germany. They decimated their political structure. They took away their army. They destroyed their economy. So their economy in Germany in the early 1920s was horrific. Inflation was up to record levels. They were printing money. It meant nothing. You look up the money in the Weimar Republic. It meant nothing. Their unemployment was out through the roof. People couldn't find jobs. There weren't enough qualified men because they had been killed in the war. I mean, it was hell. It was a hellscape. And while the economy was in the toilet, this lonely corporal started going into beer halls and telling people that the reason that the German economy was in the toilet, the reason that the Germans had lost the war, is because the politicians had sold them out and they needed to stop listening to the politicians. Does any of this sound familiar? Hitler told people that the German generals were ready to win the war until the politicians pulled the rug out from under them. And those politicians were able to do that because they were backed by Jews. He gave them a boogeyman in the form of politicians. He vilified an entire group of people for what he claimed was their participation in this process that took that took Germany down a peg. When the reality is, it was Germans' own doing that did that. And of course, you know, the punitive nature of the European nations, especially the French. But yeah, it wasn't the Jews' fault, and it wasn't the politicians' fault. They did the best that they could. But he vilified them for it anyway. And the truth didn't matter to these people. Does any of this sound familiar? And he started to make inroads in the 1920s, and the Nazi Party took off, and they started increasing their numbers. And he was considered to be a fiery speaker. He was a man of the people. He said what the people said, and he did not filter it. He told them what they needed to hear, that Germany would rise again, that Germany would again be great. Does any of this sound familiar? And then the Roaring '20s happened. The economy worldwide rebounded after World War I. And even the Germans started to do better. In fact, the Germans were doing so well after a few years that progressive ideals flourished. And Hitler couldn't make any inroads. He actually lost ground. And he had to fade into the background for a while progressive ideals took over in Germany. And they were having a good time. And Hitler was sitting on the back burner, stewing about how he had lost his place. Does any of this sound familiar? Well, we all know how this went. The 1920s ended with the stock market crash and eventually turned into the Great Depression in the U.S. And that did not just only affect the U.S., that affected worldwide, and it hit Germany hard. They were just starting to rebound. And so those people hadn't even had enough of a rebound yet before things started to get bad again, and inflation started to go up, and prices started to go up, and unemployment started to go up a little bit because of this worldwide event that was out of their hands. Does any of this sound familiar? And here comes Hitler to capitalize on the misery of the moment. Does he want to lift up the people? Does he want to help them, the politicians, to fix this problem? No, he wants to replace it. At this point, he is now calling for the replacement of all the parties in Germany that have taken them to this point, because clearly they're not getting it done. And he starts vilifying them to the point where the Germans finally just start listening, because they're so embroiled in the losses that they have in their economy. They're living through economic uncertainty, and so they're just grasping at anybody who's willing to be a strong man and tell them that it's going to be okay. And here comes Hitler saying, I will fix it, I will help you, let's make Germany great again. Does any of this sound familiar? And these people signed on, and they knew he had some flawed things. They didn't all believe in this anti-Semitic bullshit that he was peddling. They didn't believe that it was because everybody that was in the country that wasn't pure Aryan blood was the reason for it. He just kept telling them that it was all these people who were polluting the blood of Germany, that they were having so many problems. Does any of this sound familiar? And when he capitalized on it to the point where he was able to maneuver himself into political positions of power, he didn't try to do it by force this time. This time he tried to do it through political machinations, and he was successful because he had already convinced people that they had a boogeyman that they needed to fear. Now all he needed to do was get his people into positions of power so that he could help get himself into a position of power. And then he demanded ultimate loyalty from everybody in his organization. Say it with me, does any of this sound familiar? And when he came in, he did a whole bunch of stuff that made it look like he was helping the German people. He literally, his play was to kick a whole lot of people out of the country and take all of their stuff. Everything from their personal belongings to their businesses. And he gave them to Germans. He didn't even try to hide it. He literally took Jewish businesses and gave them to Germans to run. And suddenly these people who were struggling now felt like this savior was helping them. They were okay with him literally destroying somebody else's life for no good reason, just because it helped them. Does any of this sound familiar? And all they could think about was how it was helping them. All they could think about was how he was going to fix the inflation, and the economy started to come back and the numbers started to look good. But it was all smoke and mirrors, because the only reason the economy looked good was because he was kicking so many people out and taking their stuff and giving it to the people who were saying we're hurting. That's fucking wholesale theft, and he made it seem like he was doing it for them, and they bought into it. And does any of this sound familiar? You wonder why we get so mad. How do you not fucking see this? And these people were so enamored with him because of what he did for them that they allowed themselves to become Nazi fucking Germany. And it didn't take a big push. It took a vote. Does any of this sound familiar?